Hello and welcome to Illuminaries, conversations on the future of media and advertising with the leaders in the media industry. I am your host, Seraj Bharwani, Chief Strategy Officer at AcuityAds, a publicly owned company that invented Illumin, the first journey advertising platform in the ad tech industry. Here with me are Hyun and Albert. Welcome. So glad you're with us today. I'm really delighted to have a discussion with you. I'm seriously curious to learn a lot today, and you will notice that. But before we go there, why don't we start, Hyun, with you so you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Albert.
Thank you, Suraj. Hello, everyone. My name is Hyun Lee Miller, and I am the head of media at Good Apple. Good Apple is a highly specialized media and measurement agency. My favorite apple is a Fuji. Would love to learn yours, Suraj and Albert, throughout the call. I oversee the media team and nurture the growth of new disciplines and practices within Good Apple. So my background is media. I grew up on the media side, started out as an assistant media planner and have worked across many verticals, travel, entertainment, finance, e-com, retail, healthcare. I'm very passionate about tying media to real business outcomes and human benefit. A lot of the brands I work on are in the healthcare space and have the potential to change lives for the better. So I really love this industry. I'm continuously fascinated by it. I believe media can be a reflection of our culture and vice versa, which is why I'm looking forward to talk about how media can be used as a vehicle for good and change in this conversation. I'm also mom to two young kids who are starting school next Tuesday. I'm so excited for them. Of course, they're going back to school in person. On the other hand, Good Apple is going fully remote. We want to give our team the freedom and opportunity to work from anywhere. And going fully remote also means we can hire from anywhere. So I'm looking forward to expanding, growing my team across states, as I think it'll be hugely additive to our culture, getting lots of different perspectives, different backgrounds to ultimately drive change and innovation for a more vibrant future, to your point, Suraj.
Excellent. Thank you. So you bring a diversity of experience, Han. I mean, and you touched on so many important topics, which of course we will get to here. But before we go there, Albert, you want to do that?
Absolutely. So Albert Thompson, I'm the managing director of digital innovation at Walton Isaacson. Walton Isaacson, as we refer to as WI, is a full service agency, experiential, creative, production, branded entertainment, talent management, influencer, pretty much you name it. Maybe it's too much at times, but it's been a rich history of what we've accomplished and done with some notable brands like Lexus, NYPD, American Airlines announced most recently. So yeah, it's been quite a ride. I've been there. I'm in my 15th year, so I'm kind of the elder statesman in the shop, as you'd say. I think in terms of my role, it's so conventional to stay that long in an agency in this day and age, but I'm more or less kind of the marketing technologist that I tend to refer to myself. So a lot of what I'm tasked with is understanding how technology either maps on top of marketing and its challenges, or becomes a conduit for which marketing is accelerated or solved. So that's very much, my sort of calling card to the agency. Been in digital, over 20 years. Knew I wanted to do advertising coming right out of high school. So for me, it was so much a professional pursuit that actually got fulfilled. So I'm eternally grateful for that.
Oh.
I'm also what you would call, I'm that person who says that marketing is very much the parent company. I'm very much consumer first minded. So heavily gravitated to the opportunity to be on this particular show today. Excited about what we'll get into. Just got two twin girls, just started college. So empty nesting. So we'll see what that means in terms of the acceleration of professional pursuits, because I get time back. Here in Maryland with my lovely wife. But other than that, I don't want to belabor too much of it. I think people will understand who we are by how we think once we start getting into the question and answers.
Of course. You're so right. Media has become such a blend. The thing, it seems like consistently as I see it, what's attracted us to media is the colorful nature of all the different disciplines and specialties that come into the mix that
Absolutely.
are so excited, whether it is the math or the technology or the actual medium itself, or it is the people and the psychology around it and what people pay attention to or don't. Everything comes into the picture, seriously, right? And that's really what makes it so exciting. So let me set this up a little bit so that we have a little context, because clearly we could be talking about this for hours. But what we want to do is to make the most of your experiences and what you think the future ought to be, right? So advertising has been grabbing a lot of attention from consumers, advocacy groups, regulators, and of course the press and the media, right? Ads are hated, they are tolerated, and they are loved. It all depends on when you see the ad, where you see the ad, how you see the ad, and who the ad is coming from. All of that matters in this whole equation, right? Now, media and advertising professionals have a vested interest, that's us, vested interest in making sure that advertising in all its varied forms has a vibrant future, right?
Right.
And we want that future to be defined by the new generation of media practitioners. And that's you. So, what kind of future do you envision for the media and the advertising industry? I mean, this is a fascinating discussion, frankly. I haven't really gotten into this thing before, which is the reason why we decided to do this series, right? This is the first one we're doing. So, that leads us to the topic for today. What is your vision for that vibrant future of advertising? That is it. That's what we're trying to work towards, right? Okay, so Hun, let me start with you. Now, relevance is the first thing that we all think about, right? Is ad relevant? Is it relevant in the all form shapes that comes to you? I'll make it even more closer to you. Do you find ads relevant to your needs and interests when you see them, wherever you see them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some channels are better at it than others. I think that digital is more effective and at using signals that I give off in the marketplace to make ads relevant for me, right? I think that mass market media channels like traditional TV could do a better job of being relevant to me.
Mhm.
I think that would require giving up more information, right? Or maybe the brand could do a better job of being mindful of how they reflect our culture and ourselves, right? So I think that's about hiring teams that are a better reflection of who we all are as customers.
Okay, that's a very important point you make. This is the first thing, right? It's like, who is thinking about these ads
Yep.
and whose perspective is being represented here? And I think the idea of having the right team composition and knowing who it is you're trying to relate with, that's the first thing, right? And understanding. Like, if you're going after women in particular with a particular condition, medical condition. So because you've spent so much time in healthcare and so forth, right? Knowing how those people think makes a difference, right? And
Absolutely.
empathy and everything else that goes along with that. Albert, shifting to you, what do you think would make ads more relevant? Are they relevant to you?
When I look at relevancy of advertising, we have to get to this understanding of what is the first moment of truth. And I think brands believe holistically it's when their ad spot breaks the air, particular TV. Let's be real, that only happens with the Super Bowl because product launches and ads are hidden and then launched and revealed in that moment. But for the most part, we are often made aware of things that exist in the marketplace that would create desire from our peer group. It's why there's such a virality with TikTok, because the first moment of truth was when that creator got the product
Mm-hmm.
themselves, and then they display that and articulate it to the audience like this is real. And
Mm-hmm.
that discovery has everything to do with the level of engagement and the whole notion of TikTok taught me, TikTok made me buy it. And it's interesting. You look at YouTubers and that DIY effect of YouTube, that tends to be the second moment of truth. Because the DIY is, okay, well, how do I do it? How do I build it? How do I put it together? How does this work?
Mhm.
I know it
Mhm.
exists. Now I need education. I need a cheat code, essentially.
Mhm.
And there's a huge difference between that. And because when you understand whether this is the first moment or second moment of truth, you understand how to approach the advertising sector and all its relative channels, and really allows you to better relate to the message. And that also speaks to who you employ resourcing wise to create that level of relevancy,
Mhm.
because you understand the mechanism in place that the channels you're tapping into and how they're going to move the consumer, whether it's beyond way above the funnel to even a consideration funnel, whether desire actually exists or does not, and what you have to do to create that before someone actually decides to spend their money. And I
Mhm.
think there's a delusion that what comes out of the advertising sector is exactly that first moment of truth. Because at the end of the day, all businesses are in business to make money, and they want that ultimate moment of truth. That's when you start making money. You can start tracking business outcomes, as Han said, and look at P&Ls and all that particular impact. And I think that's the reset. That's why I would say like marketing is a parent company, and marketing's positioning around the consumer is you got to figure out that first moment of truth, because it may not be the lever you're doing. Hey, it could be the Amazon truck that rolled down the street. It's got us buzzing like, oh, I think I need to click something today because the fear of missing out of a package on a Tuesday because I got it every other day of the week. Like that's a real thing here. And I think that's where people need to get grounded about the role and what they are pulling levers against in that sort of consumer journey, that pathway, the decision making model, so they can proceed with a degree of humility instead of accepting or assuming that what they are doing is what is the secret sauce when really the sauce was made somewhere else.
That is so, so important. I'm so glad you said it, Albert. It's like we assume so much in general. Frankly, I'm really even talking about myself and the years that I've spent, that the consumer wants this or they want this or whatever, right? And we believe that all the great advertising that we do is really what's making a phenomenal difference out there, right? But the humility is so critical, right? The consumers really put you in place when you get to know them a little bit better. And you brought up this whole idea of the funnel or the journey. I'm going to shift a little bit onto you now that Albert has introduced this topic. Is the journey or the funnel still a relevant metaphor? Do you still think along those lines as you are having conversations with your client? Is that something that's helpful in the way you plan and in the way you buy the media?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at healthcare, a pharma company is not going to list you as an agency if you don't break down and understand patient pathway. It's everything. It is the one document that you get served up at the very beginning of the client relationship, because in their mind, if you don't understand how people make choices around medical decisioning, whether to see a doctor, get diagnosis, or as they say, buy a $7 to $10 pill, you can't make them money. And look, these companies will spend 10 million to make 100 million. They'll spend 100 million to make a billion. Like they're very intentional on revenue return.
Mm-hmm.
And they're one of the few categories that has this so locked in. I think finance does a decent job of it in certain sectors. Maybe not just commercial banking and checking accounts, but some of the more sophisticated tools, investing. They understand that. Even the mortgage business, if you're trying to buy a home, they understand of how a consumer mind really works. And if you can't tap into that as an agency or service provider, you simply just don't get a contract.
Got it, Albert. No, I think you make a good point. Han, I want to shift the conversation. Same idea, same questions in terms
Yeah.
of elaborating further on this whole concept of the journey that Albert is pointing to. How do you think about that these days in the way you are working with the clients?
Yeah. I agree with Albert so much. I think that journeys and funnels are still very important, right? I think that we all understand, though, the customer journey is no longer linear, right?
Yeah.
It's actually very non-linear and non-conforming. There are so many different types of media and so many different paths that a person and sources of truth, moments of truth that a person can take to their ultimate decision, right? So hearing about a product from a friend, Googling it, then seeing it on Hulu, going back and reading product reviews. I have to get a coupon, forgetting about it for a couple of months, and getting a social ad for it, and then maybe converting off of it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
unpredictable and has so many forks and paths you can go down. Still, as long as we understand that the journey is not a straight line, building customer journeys and funnels are very helpful frameworks to help brands and agencies get on the same page and understand who we're trying to reach, when we're trying to reach them, what kind of messaging is going to speak to them. We just need to all understand that the journey is very nuanced and remain very flexible. I think what helps us create great media plans for our clients is really understanding the value and impact our products are going to have on the end user.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the products I work on are health related and can be life changing. So thinking about our customers as like real humans,
Mm-hmm.
right, and trying to improve their lives versus a demo of females 25 to 54, right? Not just thinking about them as a segment,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about them as humans, I
Yeah.
think motivates us and to truly think about how we can develop plans that support their complicated lives and can make a real impact.
Yes. Yes. Let
I want
me.
to jump in
You go ahead, Albert, please.
because I like this, where she started. When you think about how episodic and choppy the consumer journey is, media started as it was all a real estate business. My TV network's better than yours. My billboard is bigger than yours, and then a better hillside than yours. And we're in a place where attention is the new real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever gets the consumer attention is what matters. Now, based on the fact that we have all these micro moments, as Google point, and we look at our cell phone 150 times a day, where is attention? It's all over the place. It's super scattered. It's very unpredictable. You almost can't even model it. It's the one thing that makes TikTok successful because it's based on the interest graph, not the social graph, because the interest graph is where we put our attention. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a shift that needs to happen in advertising. So when you start to really build into this notion of where we are going, it's the factor that if attention is the new real estate, where should the advertising pipes now be flowing? Because we have to better connect the digital ecosystem so we can follow the attention stack. And this is something that IAB put out about 2 years ago. And we
Yes.
drew it up. The attention stack looked nothing like our favorite players. It had a series of logos that the average general market global agency doesn't want to buy because it's hyper inefficient. And
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
we moved to programmatic and efficiency, we moved away from attention. And as Hunt said, started treating consumers like marketplace nodes. We need this impression, we need this data point, this user session. I'm like, people aren't any of these things. They're actually people. So to Han's earlier question, if you want to get to my attention related to apples, we got to start with Honeycrisp. That's where my journey started, right?
Love it. Love it.
Excellent
You're
choice.
Honeycrisp. Everything flows from there. Then I got to look at Gala. I got to look at G. And there's certain apples I never get to. And at that point, then I just leave the journey in that store and go to the next grocery store because I'm going back to the Honeycrisp factor. And you're talking about someone who grew up in Georgia on green apples. So I'm on the other end of the continuum now.
It's hard.
Right. So when you think about that, it's like there's no predictive modeling of that. I moved to a new region of the country and discovered new taste buds and flavors, and now reoriented my apple tree. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
No, that was fine. I love it. I know how you snuck it in there. If I were to take away the message that I hear from both of you, is the consumer doesn't think of any of this as a journey per se. They're going about their lives the way they do, whether they are speaking with their friends or colleagues or family or whoever, things they're watching, enjoying, pick up attention from on the street, off the street, wherever, right? The metaphor of the use of the journey, the way you described it, Han, is far more helpful and conducive to the way marketers think about that, because there is at least some method to this chaotic madness, right, in terms of where the consumers are going, which is so unpredictable. But it does help in framing, it does help in planning, it does help, to your point, Albert, in understanding where those moments are where you can in fact make a difference. Did I get that right?
Agree.
Okay, so let's move to the next phase of that, in terms of how do you make use of the tools that are accessible to you today to get that balance. Remember, both of you guys didn't even wait 60 seconds to communicate the fact that, it is about outcomes ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, two ways in which we have measured media, whether it's efficiency with which we can actually reach people and the effectiveness. Are we getting the results? Are we getting the outcomes, right? The current tools that you have available, you have two big resources at your disposal right now. You've got amazing talent that both of you recruit and bring, and you have some amazingly powerful agencies that you are leading, and you have the algorithms, you have the platforms, you have the technology. How are you making use of the two? And are the tools helping you to get the best of the both in terms of driving efficiency and then ultimately effectiveness? Let's go there. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit. Start with you, Han. Go ahead. What's your
Yeah.
perspective?
Yeah. This is a really hot topic within our agency. I'm glad we're talking about it. We've been doing a lot of experiments with artificial intelligence and machine learning at Good Apple, and the outcomes are real. Just to be honest, like we see performance improvements in our business outcomes, which are great from a client perspective, right? But here's the thing: I think that, setting up the right data sets, creating the pipes that feed the data into the optimization engine, the algorithm, it takes tremendous setup and monitoring time. So there's tremendous human capital, right, that needed for that type of problem solving. And then once the AI is running, it takes more work to glean the insights. So for example, when our media team members are manually optimizing their campaigns, they can see the changes they're making from a targeting or a placement perspective, right? Since they're seeing, oh, this audience segment is performing really well on this platform, so I'm going to give it more media weight, right?
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
making decisions
On
under
the fly. Yeah.
organization, right? So they're understanding what's going on. But the AI is making these changes on the fly, and they're doing it very quickly. For example, in one of our experiments, the AI was able to optimize like 20 times more versus what our traders were able to do manually during the same time period, right?
Hmm.
So great, the outcomes are great, but we need to dig in to understand like the how and the why the results are so great, right?
Hmm.
And that's, I think, the piece that needs the human capital still, and why clients value so much the human capital, because they're able to tell the how and the why to help grow their brand.
That's such an important point, Han. I'm so glad you brought this up because the hardest thing for algorithms to do is to explain
Yeah.
what they did.
Right.
Hardest thing we are finding is like they will go chase a particular KPI or an objective like a missile to a target.
Yep.
And they do that phenomenally well, to your point, right? But when you ask why did you do that and how did you get there? It is very difficult to get the answers. All you get is ones and twos and zeros and ones and whatnot. And the explanation is just like, well, what is that, right? This is the reaction I get from the PhD who runs our AI practice
Mm.
within our company. And he'd say, if you ask me why the algo did it, I have no idea. It's just doing it. It's like because I programmed it to focus on that particular objective, right? Albert, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I think there needs to be a conversation around the truth in automation. Because one thing I can give WI credit for, and this was an old agency tagline, is we face the world the way it faces us, and we face the world the way it faces our brands, meaning a highly diverse agency. Over the years, we've done Black, Latino, queer, general market. So the makeup of the agency is all those things. I mean, it's a very diverse group of people because that's the challenge of brands to appeal with a greater degree of inclusivity. So we were doing that long before MarTech was so much of a buzzword. And the reality of it is, as I always say, the machines are only as good as the people programming them. That's how this works. So if Good Apple's having a lot of success, then the people who have programmed it have done an effective job. You can't just turn on the tech and it just delivers outcomes. It needs that human element of input. And then, as you said, it needs that human interpretation of what this means to tell a brand, because they don't speak MarTech. They hate it, actually. They just know that their CMO is forcing them to invest in it for the greater level of efficiency and business outcomes. So it's very necessary. in this sort of marketing ecosystem. But to sit there and navigate the lingo and language, it's sometimes to a marketer, it's almost offensive. It's like, I deal with consumers. Give me some consumer speak. Don't give me a data dictionary. I don't need that.
I completely get it. Han, where you started us at the beginning of this conversation, which was having teams that are representative of the audience that you are trying to appeal to, cater to, be responsive to from a consumer audience side of it. What Albert just pointed out is a similar representation needs to go into how these algorithms are built, right? Who is programming it? Who is contributing to it? Are they sensitive to who they are trying to appeal to, and so forth? There's a balance required on that side, right? So thank you. You guys covered that at an amazing spectrum and depth here. The talk of reach and frequency has been happening since the day advertising was invented. Are we getting reach? Are we getting the right frequency? Are we overloading on frequency? This is the constant conversation. Media fragmented, and therefore frequency overload, whatever, right? Are we just as focused on effectiveness is the question. How is effectiveness coming into this conversation of reach and frequency? And there is one other element that you brought up, Albert, which was attention. That's a new dimension getting introduced into the reach frequency. And so elaborate a little bit more. I want both your perspectives on this, which is control over reach and frequency sufficient to drive the effectiveness objective, or do we need more, like attention, in the mix? Question is, why? Han, can we go with you first?
Yeah, sure. I think that it's about reach and frequency and attentiveness, right? I think it's baseline, right? We have to consider that not all impressions are created equal, right? I'm sorry to say, but a banner ad exposure is just a different level of impact versus a branded TikTok, right? At the same time, you're probably watching TV in your living room, right? And scrolling through your social feed at the same time, right? That's just the reality of our customer. Attention is so fragmented now. So on average, how many screens do you have in front of you? I mean, even at work, do you have 3? You have your laptop, your computer, then you probably have an extra monitor, right? And then you have your phone. So we're multitasking, trying to be as productive as possible. So from a media perspective, we've analyzed how many ad exposures and what type of media mix actually produces the most optimal results, right? And we've used these models to inform our planning optimization. But I think that making sure that these front end metrics like reach, frequency, attentiveness, attention metrics, these all have to be leading indicators, indicative of business impact, right? It's like we have to figure out what's reach, what frequency, what attention, what attentiveness is actually indicative of business impact down the line for our brands, right? So that's what we're really focusing on, connecting and making and smoothing out the lines between leading and lagging indicators of success.
That is critical. Thank you. Yeah. So it seems to me that this whole idea between driving media through front end currency of reach and frequency and potentially attentiveness, or through measurement, which is outcome driven. And the fine ground that you have found, Han, in the way you described it, is you need some degree of predictability in the currency itself to be able to say, what outcome should I expect? You can't wait for 2 months or 3 months for the results to come out, is what I'm reading.
Yeah.
You can't wait for the results to come out and say, yeah, you know what? Well, this combination of reach frequency actually made a difference. So maybe that's where we go. And by then, the media obviously has changed significantly, right? Albert, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, it's a great debate that's going to go to the end of time, because when I think about it, I love what Amazon and eBay do. They are our first and second moment of truth companies, meaning Other people who bought what you bought also bought this.
Uh-huh.
You looked at this yesterday, it's still available, and now it's a little bit cheaper. And they already know that's all that's needed to get you to come downstream and make that ultimate moment of truth. So I think brands need to understand that, because there are certain brands that are, and this isn't my quote, that are trading as it's say today's reach to be tomorrow's attention and the next day's sales. And it just doesn't work for that in every category for every product, but everybody's employing the same model, and that just doesn't make sense. I think brands need to understand how consumption works in their category, because consumerism happens before media. We don't just buy because there's media and we're exposed to it. We buy sometimes for different facets. It could be that we like our neighbor's car, we want the same one now.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that we had a poster on the wall and now we need to own that as well. There are other factors that drive what we do. And I think the huge thing of marketing is to spend more time on the consumer psychology side to understand why consumers buy what they buy, like seriously. Then I think you can get into, okay, well, how much reach is really needed to move this product? And this is post-launch. I believe in the beginning, you need a decent amount of reach to get it out and see where you're going to get traction.
That's an important part. Albert, it could be, you mentioned a few things. It could be that the latest Nike NFT that I saw is what's driving me to go look and hunt for that particular sneaker that I want to go buy, right? I mean, the ways we learn about things are changing, right? In very
Absolutely.
significant.
Yeah. If you think about how everybody's buying Air Jordan brand shoes,
there you go.
Better colors, different sizes, selling 610X 30 years later with no TV spots. I mean, what are we talking about? So desire doesn't need the reach. What it needs is the fact that every time you go to sporting events, half the stadium is walking around on them with them. And that's the product trial. Like, I think I need a pair, and I'm going to pay a stupid amount of money in surf apps. And that gamification of acquiring a Jordan brand shoe now has a stronger pull than any form of traditional advertising will ever have. I mean, because they do one thing very well. They contribute to the culture. And that's another X factor. If a brand contributes to the culture, then the rules around reach and frequency go out the window, because that contribution means it almost becomes gospel at some point, which means that at a certain point, you're going to be inbound to heavily consider buying it.
Understood. Albert, you know what I was thinking about when you first started this discussion? You went in very opposite end of the spectrum from where you started to where you just ended this, right? In just the last 60 seconds, which was you started with Amazon and eBay.
Yeah.
And you ended up with the conversation about culture around wherever, whether it's Web3 or the stadiums or the events or whatever it is, where you learn and you become part of that, right? You want to be consuming with everybody else and, be part of it. Interesting thing is, as much as I am convinced of the formula of how sales-driven apparatus Amazon has created, I'm telling you, there are a lot of brands I've worked with who have struggled because they don't have enough brand recognition.
Yes.
So people don't look for it, unfortunately, and it gives undue advantage to brands that have already established enough awareness and reputation and so forth. So obviously, there are many factors at play in the way this plays out. Hyun, do you have a perspective on any of this discussion in terms of like where the initiation happens? Because there's a distinction between established brands and new brands, and where they initiate the dialogue and where the journey sort of starts,
Yeah. And I think that this kind of like triggers for me, like the promise of like Web 3.0. I know I'm taking this like a step further here, right? But, and it may be too futuristic, but like, it just reminds me that like, okay, so Web 3.0 is the next generation of the internet, right? And it's going to be more user-centric.
Sure.
Right? With new currencies, right? With more AR, VR experiences. And the vision of that is everything will be interoperable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So meaning we'll have like, we all have separate logins right now to like Google, to Meta, to your online bank. But the vision for Web 3.0 is that your identity will be singular, pervasive and safe across the internet, right? And that you'll be able to control your data and even monetize it if you want to, right? So, maybe in Web 3.0, we'll all have the ability to curate what types of ads I want to see, types of ads like you don't want to see, because you'll have more control of your data, right?
Yes, yes. And the journey, when you go into the interoperability, now the journey is universal. It's not what is my journey inside Google or the journey inside Amazon or the journey inside whatever, and nobody else knows really because the data never really comes out of any of these platforms, right? So the future looks the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have frequently said, when it comes to walled gardens, they're like Vegas. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, whatever happens there, it
It's
stays.
there. Unless you cut a big enough check, and then they'll give you something as nuanced as a data clean room.
Yeah, it's very possible, right? Okay, but Han, now that you've taken us into Web3, you're clearly thinking future.
Yeah.
So I want to now bring it to the fulfillment element of that, which is what we all want as professionals in the media and the advertising industry, right? So, I've always wondered, do media people feel confident about their role in the media and advertising ecosystem? Do they believe their contributions are being recognized, they're valued, they're appreciated by the clients? What's the general feel around that?
Yeah, I mean, God, I really hope so. I really do. Reflecting back on all the media roles that I've had in my career, one of my favorites was to be a media planner.
Ah,
Like, because as a media planner, you're ultimately in charge of the plan, right? You're making important decisions on where to invest your clients' ad dollars and hopefully giving them a good return. And the media ecosystem was a lot more simple in the early 2000s, which was when I was media planning. It's a lot more complicated now, lots of channels. It's the media's team's job to understand now all the channels at a very high level and then to connect and integrate all the channels together to create the overarching media strategy, right? So overall, I try to make our team's contributions and appreciated by connecting everything back, whatever they're doing to our client and the customers they're serving, as well as the value you're bringing to other team members as humans, right? How are we making our clients feel supported? How are we making a positive change in our customers' lives? How are we working together to build new products and services so we can all succeed together? Sure, it's about doing good, high ROI work, but when it comes down to it, post COVID, like it's also about connecting the day to day work you're doing with the humans you're impacting, your clients, your fellow apples, your media partners, your customers. So I think that's how I like to try to make our team feel valued and appreciated by connecting it back to the humans you're impacting across all levels of organization and across when you're doing the work.
yeah, you're bringing up the element of connection. This is not working in isolation. This is not about just sitting there on your platforms of one sort or the other and just running crazy stuff and then expecting, okay, here's the report and we're done with it. You're talking about a very collaborative, connected form of media, which is what you would like to see, is what you're talking about. That's what has given you the most satisfaction. And that's what you believe, it seems, that will keep your teams engaged to do the best work they are capable of doing, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Albert, what part of what you guys do is appreciated by your clients? Obviously, you've had Lexus forever. There's something about what you guys do they like.
Yeah, I think it's, probably the continuity is a huge piece. Having the history of the brand's evolution, really being able to play that forward. Because a lot of times, advertising media business is almost like a wedding planner, trying to orient around all these high stakes moments, high anxiety, headset on. By the end of the night, you're ready to just go in the bathroom and vomit, just because it was a lot. And I think when you start to transition from being wedding planning 100 moments for a client to being a marital counselor and guiding them through into the marketplace, that the dynamic of the relationship evolves because it's now grounded in trust, for which there will be moments, but it isn't defined by just the moment. It's really defined by a greater connection around what you are building together. And I think that's been the benefit of the the Lexus relationship, which, your company's been able to see because we've gone back about 7, 8 years at this point. But that is how we also treat the partnerships. We want people who can go the long haul. We're not looking for episodic relationships. We're not looking for situationships. And I think there are a lot of relationships in the business that are very much defined by that. They're stints. And what we're looking at is a continuous build. Look, human beings live in a continuous life stream. So if you approach client relationships the same way, this will be our live stream to henceforth and maybe till something just goes sideways, then it
Mhm.
has to be something over time. Then when they understand that, there's a greater degree of trust that they give you and extend to take them into these new frontiers and across the evolution. And that's when you get to go tell them, look, we went to the future. This is what we saw and this is what's coming. We want you to get ready because it's coming, and technology doesn't care about your opinion anyway, so you need to get ready for it. You got to have that kind of relationship where you can onboard the next chapter before the chapter starts, and that's a huge piece in terms of guiding into this evolution. And as Han said, when we're on the precipice of Web3, or part of it is already here, orienting clients around what those new rules of engagement are going to be, but the new opportunity to redefine themselves. And they have to be working with people that they trust to help redefine who they are.
I'm going to come to the final topic, which is, what do you really want to change if you had to change? What part of it that you believe is going to have to alter for advertising to remain exciting, vibrant, and keep you passionate about what you're doing? Is it about the team? Is it about the roles? Is it the whole blend of remote versus in person? What is it? Where are we headed here, and where are you taking us? Han, let's start with you.
Yeah, let's do this, Albert. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I think that our philosophy at Good Apple is to train everyone on our team to be an analyst, to be curious and to be open to change. So, our role as a media team is evolving, but I think our mantra to think consumer first always, like that's our baseline, consumer first, consumer first. To be data driven, it's going to help us evolve. So, for example, as we move from building multi-channel media plans to omni-channel plans, right? I think our roles will evolve to figuring out what data points are available and what connection points we can utilize to engage with our customer in the most relevant way for them at that moment. So I think, in my opinion, instead of being purely media strategists and media negotiators, we are also becoming data strategists and negotiators in a way, right? So data right now is valuable currency, right? The industry is moving towards a more privacy first era, and agencies and clients to move to the future. I think that we need to figure out their connected data strategy. I
Mm-hmm.
think also to just answer your question about like the internal, like the remote versus in office, like I want to figure out how to recreate those magic moments you have with your coworkers as you pass them in the halls, as you turn your chair around and ask them to how to do something in Facebook Ad Manager, as you talk about your weekend in the kitchen, as you walk a blocks together to get like sweet green, right? Because during those moments, as Albert was saying, it's very important to build trust, that connection, exchanging ideas, creating new ideas. You know, as we move to a more remote work environment, you don't get those opportunities as readily. So, we're trying to do a lot of in-person events and client visits and team retreats and dog picnics. We have a lot of dogs at the agency, volunteer events to keep
Yes.
that in-person connection going strong. So, I think that's about in the future, like giving everyone the freedom and flexibility of remote work, but balancing that by creating trust, building in-person connections within your own team, as well as, of course, like the cross-discipline thing. That's very important to build as well.
Right, right. I mean, you are shaping the future of media, and the only way you see it done is by building greater camaraderie, more collaboration, broader disciplines, more perspectives. That's what I'm hearing from you, is the way you're going to shape where the next evolution is of what media is, and how is that going to make a difference in consumers' lives, but also bring something of value to the clients, right? I mean, that's essentially where you're headed. Albert, your angle on this?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is for people to change up the optics, because it's for consumers, it's oftentimes less about the view of things, it's the meaning of things. And to accelerate what I mean by that is, I was recently presenting on the future of out of home, and I said the future of out of home, now that it's gone programmatic, isn't about the view of it, the billboards, the signage. It's the meaning of it. Picking up a lost consumer view when they leave the house and aren't streaming and watching CTV. No, when you think about Web3 and the metaverse, it's not the view of it. Are the graphics amazing? Because we've had people say, "How that looks like Atari." It's the meaning of the ability to connect in a dimension that is as close as you will get to being in person, standing in front of someone. That means something to humankind.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of facets where it's the meaning of it. It's the same thing, Siraj, when you mentioned the algos. It's not the view of the data because the metrics look great. It's the meaning of what does it mean about the consumer journey and what they are doing and what are they up to.
Yes.
That's what's been lost or never discovered for many, is the meaning of it is what drives human nature. It's why we got rid of Blackberries and Trios, because it meant more to be attached to the entire Apple ecosystem. More so than as they say, do we like the buttons on a BlackBerry better because it reminds us of an old typewriter, which we had greater familiarity with. So
Yeah.
those things are very true. And when you start to understand how human beings work, and I love what Han said about intellectual curiosity and discovery is the bedrock of marketing. Without it, you're essentially on borrowed time, meaning you're going to die out and you'll be expected to be replaced.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that intellectual curiosity leads you to understanding and interpreting the meaning of what you see taking place, less of, like, a lot of people discount SMS because it looks the lowest of low tech marketing. Okay. But it's the meaning of instant gratification and connection that is why a Gen Zennial would rather do that than open an email. Who cares if it's not as sexy because you couldn't layer up with Photoshop artwork? That's not the point. So I think that's the thing that I would leave as a final soundbite from my perspective on how the business needs to change.
That is so, so important. I love it. I love it. I'm telling you, I've learned so much today just in the short period of conversation that we have done together and shared our collective sort of perspective on things. That the idea that the future of media is going to be shaped through collaboration and diversity of perspectives and in the search for meaning,
Mm-hmm.
not get lost in the tactical details as much as what is the meaning behind the medium for the consumer or the user who is doing that. Just dressing up something isn't really the end game here. It's about what does it mean to the consumer in the lives they live today, right? And that is so hard. That is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of, like, humility where you started us. That's beautiful, because not assuming too much, and be always open to learning from sort of where do we go next, right? Well, I couldn't be more delighted to have this conversation with you guys. Frankly, I so appreciate you being here with so full of insights and inspiration and so forth for the teams and the audience that is really trying to figure out themselves. Do they belong to this industry, and how exciting could it be, to be part of it as we are unfolding and as you are collectively unfolding the future of where this industry goes. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a good day.
Thank you.